Kyoshi is considered the most ruthless avatar in history. In her 2 or 3 appearances, she showed us how powerful she is, and living for more than 200 years in the world of Avatar, she is almost a god. But this was not always the case. In her early days, she lived on the streets, grew up among thieves, and did not learn the 4 elements to save the world, but to kill someone. Today, I'm going to tell you how an orphan ended up allying herself with mobsters to become the most brutal avatar that ever existed, and how seeking peace was not her main motivation, but rather revenge. This is Appa Comic. To tell Kyoshi's story, we have to go back more than 400 years from when Aang emerges from the iceberg. At that time, a young avatar Kurut is on his deathbed and asks his teammates Jianzhu, Kelsang, and He Ran for one thing: to find and train his next reincarnation, an avatar who would be born in the Earth Kingdom. Spoiler, they didn't do it. 7 years later, they still hadn't found Kuruk's successor. Kelsang and Jianzhu didn't know what to do anymore. They had been traveling all over the Earth Kingdom trying to find the next avatar without success. So, since they couldn't come up with a better plan, they decided to steal from the air nomads. Normally, each nation has a specific method for finding the next avatar. In the Fire Nation, for example, they threw bones into a bonfire and read the cracks in the bones. The air nomads showed children a large number of toys, but only 4 out of hundreds belonged to the avatar's past lives. In the case of the Earth Kingdom, they used a method where they basically triangulated the possible location of the new reincarnation through directional geomancy. Basically, they threw carved bones with trigrams and ruled out possible locations. This was the method they had used, but it clearly wasn't working. So Kelsang borrowed the avatar's relics, went to a village that no one knew about, and did a little test without anyone knowing. If it worked, they would repeat it in bigger cities until they found him. The thing is, after a whole day of trying with all the children in Yokoya Port, they still had nothing. But at the last moment, a malnourished Whirl, who appeared to be about 12 years old due to her enormous height, approached and took the first of the 4 avatar relics. The elders encouraged her to choose another toy to see if she would take all 4. But she said, "You're going to give me 4 toys at this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the world, and specifically in this house?" Yes. So she became suspicious and ended up escaping with one of the relics. Kelsang, intrigued, followed her. He discovered that she was an orphan who lived among the trash, ate whatever she could find, and survived as best she could. The monk decided to take care of her, and thus a very special bond was born. That girl was Kyoshi, and over time, Kelsang became her father figure. With the test being a total failure, Kelsang and Jianzhu continued traveling and trying the Earthrealm method. On one of their trips, they passed through Makapu, a place we would see much later in the episode The Fortune Teller. And there, they met a boy who played Paisho extraordinarily well, beating absolutely everything that crossed his path. Jianzhu, who was very good at Paisho, played a game with him and observed how, piece by piece, move by move, the boy used tactics identical to those used by Kuruk. The chances of that happening were impossible, and after 7 years of not finding the next avatar, there weren't many alternatives left. It had to be him. And although they didn't know it, they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. Jianzhu was literally one of the most powerful and influential people in the Earth Kingdom, on par with the Beifongs or important noble houses. That's why, when he decided to train Yoon, the child prodigy who was supposedly the new avatar, he built an entire mansion just for that purpose. As the years passed, the esteemed Yoon became more and more talented. But really talented, eh? He was a powerful earthbender, totally skilled, knowledgeable in negotiation, diplomacy, history, and the culture of other nations. He was the perfect avatar, except for one important detail. In almost 9 years of training, he was never able to use any element other than earthbending. This was not public knowledge. Clearly, few people knew about it. How could there be an avatar who couldn't use all 4 elements? Jianzhu gave him more and more training so that he could bend the others, but nothing happened. Meanwhile, Kyoshi, Kelsang's protege, now lived and worked in the mansion. She was the Avatar's servant and was having the time of her life. Although she was shy and sometimes mistreated by her peers, she enjoyed being with Kelsang, enjoyed having a roof over her head, and enjoyed having friends, the Avatar Yoon and Rangi, Hiran's daughter, who was the Avatar's personal bodyguard. Despite their different social statuses, the three got along very well, so much so that Yoon invited her on her first diplomatic mission, to sign a peace agreement with a band of murderers and looters. Excellent first date. It turns out that during the years without an avatar, the Earth Kingdom was a paradise for criminals. The coasts were completely unprotected, and with super corrupt governments and a gigantic territory, there was no way to stop them. For that reason, now that there was a new avatar, they were going to negotiate a truce with the Fifth Nation, a band of pirates that had been wreaking havoc for years. Before leaving, the servants were in the mansion's kitchen preparing food when Kelsang arrived and, to entertain himself, proposed an impromptu poetry contest among the employees. Yes, it was a bit random, but hey, there was no TV, folks. When it was Kyoshi's turn, she recited a romantic poem that left the monk completely speechless. The reason? He had heard it before, word for word. It was one that Kuruk wrote for Heiran before she married someone else, but never gave to her. Only they knew it. This, added to the fact that Yoon couldn't bend another element, made him think, what if it was always Kyoshi? But he couldn't reveal it right now because it would completely discredit Yoon. They couldn't go to the pirates and say, well, we have someone here who might be the Avatar, but just in case, sign the girl who brings you tea. So, with this doubt in his mind, the monk kept quiet and they set off. The team meets up with Tagaka, the pirate chief, on an iceberg to the south. While they are on the ship, everything is fine. They talk and drink wine, and although there is obviously tension, things look good. But during dinner, instead of talking about peace, love, or their adventures at sea, Tagaka starts to air Jianzhu and Kelsang's dirty laundry, revealing their dark secrets in front of Yoon to destabilize and intimidate him. Basically, to take advantage of his weakness when negotiating the agreement. He confesses that behind Jianzhu's image as an important politician of the Earth Kingdom, he was an outlaw killer known as the Gravedigger of the Zhulu Pass, a nickname he earned among criminal gangs by torturing and burying alive more than 5,000 people. A very shady old man. And Kelsang was no slouch either. A few years ago, he earned the nickname the Living Typhoon because he created a massive tornado at sea that destroyed ships from the Fifth Nation, maiming many and leaving dozens dead. The thing is, as was obvious to everyone except the protagonists of the story, the pirates set a trap for them. At the moment of signing the agreement, Tagaka impales a master who was with the team with ice, freezes Yoon, and disperses the team. The only one left standing is Kyoshi, who, seeing her friends in danger and the pirate fleet ready to attack, uses part of the Avatar's energy for the first time, dragging giant rocks from the bottom of the sea, with which she destroys much of the Fifth Nation's fleet and gives the rest time to fight. After that, she falls unconscious without remembering anything. The return home becomes a bigger problem than the near-death experience at the hands of the pirates. No one saw Kyoshi with her eyes lit up, but they saw the huge number of enormous rocks on the surface of the icebergs. Neither Yoon nor Jianzhu, who were excellent benders, could bring rocks from such a depth. In addition, Kelsang tells his companion about the poem, so they begin to test her to see if she can use the other elements. Kyoshi does not like the possibility of being the Avatar at all, and even less so of taking Yoon's place, who desires it with all his heart and trains 24 hours a day. For weeks, they tried everything: tests, training, meditation, but nothing worked. Kyoshi couldn't bend the other elements, and Yoon was still a prodigy, but only with earth. For this reason, Jianzhu, who was totally frustrated, without telling anyone, planned a private trip with the two of them. Using Pang Pang, Kelsang's flying bison, they flew to an old abandoned quarry in a remote village in the Earth Kingdom. Yoon and Kyoshi followed him deep into a cave, where the architect, as he was also called, prepared a series of incense sticks and asked the two young men to close their eyes, sit down, and breathe. Soon, Kyoshi realizes that he cannot move a muscle. They were completely paralyzed. Yoon, who had received training against poisons, manages to open his eyes and is completely frozen by what he sees. In front of them, in the darkness of the cave, there was a huge, luminous eye staring at them. Jianshu steps forward, bows respectfully, and greets the spirit, Father Glowworm, telling him how it has been impossible to identify the new avatar, and since he had fought Kuruk years ago, perhaps he could recognize him. Father Glowworm agreed and stretched out some tentacles made of a kind of slime, first biting Yoon and then Kyoshi, effectively recognizing that she was the avatar. Yoon was broken inside. He had dedicated his life to training and was totally convinced that he was the one. But things were about to get worse for this boy. After tasting the Avatar's blood, Glowworm wanted more. Jianzhu quickly attacked the spirit with earthbending, enraging it, but managing to rescue his beloved, taking her and escaping to the surface. Yoon was left behind, but the architect didn't even try. He simply takes Kyoshi and upon exiting, collapses the entire cave, burying the spirit and Yoon alive. Kyoshi doesn't understand anything. Not only has she just discovered she's the Avatar, but he also witnessed how Jianzhu let his best friend die. The paralysis begins to disappear. He can move, breathe, and looking at the collapsed exit of the cave, his tears turn to anger. With one movement, he lifts a giant block of stone and throws it at Jianzhu, but the old man is too skilled, and there is no chance of him being hit. With a slight movement of his hand, he splits the giant piece of marble with the cleanest cut you will ever see. Kyoshi has a big problem. Her earthbending is brutal but uncontrolled. She cannot manipulate small rocks, only moving huge rocks in a crude way. Meanwhile, Jianzhu can completely master the earth. He can carve even millimeter-sized pieces of earth. After the attack, Jianzhu, with a subtle movement, creates a gag of earth that covers Kyoshi's mouth and nose, beginning a process of suffocation. While Kyoshi is on the ground with the air running out, Jianzhu takes the time to explain the political consequences of revealing to the world that Yoon was never the Avatar, or how the Earth Kingdom would fall back into instability. He did what he did. Kyoshi had to go back with him, whether she liked it or not. But at that moment, Kelsang arrives. She arrives at the quarry in her glider and finds out where they are by searching Jianzhu's room. Seeing Kyoshi frightened, she hugs her and protects her, placing herself between her and her friend. Kelsang demands an explanation. What happened to Yoon and why he didn't tell him about the trip? Jianzhu omits information, explaining that a spirit confirmed Kyoshi as the Avatar, and Yoon was the victim of an attack, which is a shame, but they have to go back, and he did what he could. Kelsang doesn't believe him at all. He knows him, he can see it in his face. But he's his lifelong friend, so he decides they'll talk about it later. For now, Kyoshi returns with him, and Jianzhu will no longer be responsible for the Avatar's care and training. In an almost invisible movement, he sends a small stone dagger that pierces Kelsang's neck, killing him instantly in absolute silence. The monk's body falls lifeless at Kyoshi's feet. She sees him, and her eyes cloud over, and everything goes dark. She loses consciousness and enters a completely uncontrolled Avatar state for the first time, breathing fire and completely destroying the place. When she comes to, Jianzhu is gone. She doesn't understand how everything happened so quickly. A few days ago, she was a happy servant, and now she has lost her father, her best friend, and has become the Avatar. The only thing clear to her is one thing that will mark the rest of her life and her path as an avatar. She will devote whatever time is necessary to avenge Kelsang and Yoon by killing Jianzhu. Kyoshi returns to the Avatar's mansion in Pengpeng to find Rangi, the only person in the world she can trust and whom she wants to protect from Jianzhu. When she arrives, she tells him everything and asks him to hide until she takes care of Jianzhu, but Rangi won't let her go alone, partly because of his duty to protect the Avatar's life, but more importantly because she is his friend. Kyoshi lived on the streets and didn't have many possessions, but what she did have was a chest that she never opened, one that her parents left her when they abandoned her. The old trunk contained a box of makeup, some metal fans, and a diary with information about the Flying Opera Company. But what was all this about the Flying Opera Company? Let's go back a few years in time. Jessa was a talented nomad from the Eastern Temple. She received her tattoos at an early age, and on one of her missions to help the Earth Kingdom, she fell in love with an actor named Hark, who was a criminal. The guy was handsome, but led her astray, convincing her to help him with a robbery, which the dear Jessa liked. They fell in love, committed crimes together, and by abandoning her air nomad customs and acting against her principles, she gradually lost her powerful airbending. But she found a way to compensate for this loss of power, using a pair of fans that amplified her abilities. The point is that the beloved completely abandoned her culture, tattooing snakes on her arrows and founding together with Hark the Flying Opera Company, a criminal organization, or Daofei, who disguise themselves as theater actors in order to move freely between cities. They were Kyoshi's parents, who, when they had her, did not want that life for her, and so the best solution they could find was to abandon her. Excellent human beings. The diary they left her contained information about the Daofei, including every detail of their criminal codes, customs, locations, among other things. So Kyoshi thought, if we go to any remotely known place, Jianzhu will find us because of his political influence. And it was true. The guy had contacts in every major city in the Earth Kingdom, and as the Avatar's mentor, everyone wanted to be his friend to get favors. But what if they went to a totally unknown village, far from the law and Jianzhu's eyes? Better yet, to the home of the Flying Opera Company, founded by his parents. They would have a better chance of surviving and might even find protection. The ladies set off on their journey and arrive at a village where they find, according to the diary, the headquarters of the Daofei organization, with all its facilities in perfect condition, bags full of gold coins, the fruit of decades and decades of exquisitely planned crimes. But they find that all that remains of the Flying Opera Company are a couple of people. Kirima, a waterbender, Wang, an earthbender, Lek, another earthbender, and Lao Ge, the typical old man you wouldn't give 2 cents for, but who is actually a genius. At first, they are almost ready to fight, but after revealing that she is the daughter of Jessa and Hark, due to their Daofei codes of honor, the elders accept Kyoshi and Rangi. Because yes, they can loot and kill, but among themselves, the codes are clear. The group decides to hide them from public view and give them shelter, but with some conditions, and this is when Kyoshi's story becomes The Sopranos. The situation was as follows. Over time, the Flying Opera Company lost power and incurred debt with the wrong individuals. So to protect themselves, they had to partner with the Autumn Flower Society, a much larger Daofei organization with more power and control. Obviously, this alliance did not come without a price. The Flying Opera Company owed them a favor and would soon have to repay it. They had to enter Governor Tei's palace, an ultra-fortified place, to rescue a prisoner. Now they had a 10-ton tool to accomplish that mission, Kyoshi's flying bison. So the deal was as follows. The opera company would hide Kyoshi and Rangi, but they would join their organization and help them repay their debt to the Autumn Flower. Kyoshi accepted because she had no other choice, having to swear allegiance to the criminals, becoming one, now officially, a Daofei criminal and member of the Flying Opera Company. Now that she was under Daofei's protection, Kyoshi began to train seriously, asking Rangi to teach her basic firebending moves in secret, because at that time, the gang did not know that she was the Avatar. She also realizes that Lao Ge could be someone mentioned in her parents' diary, Tigui the Immortal, known for being in the first group along with Jisa and Hark, and also because, in theory, he was over 300 years old. In addition, he also had a reputation for being an extraordinary assassin, so when Kyoshi recognized him, she asked him to teach her how to be an assassin, and she secretly trained with him. One day, in the middle of a desolate village, a Shirshu appears and attacks the gang. Clearly, it had been sent by Janju, and using its impressive sense of smell, it found Kyoshi and Rangi. When they manage to escape, Kyoshi has to reveal that she is the Avatar. At first, no one believes her. They basically laugh at her, but using her fans, she manages to hold a few drops of water in the air, discovering that her mother's weapons allow her to have better control, something that in the future will allow her to manipulate smaller rocks. Upon learning this, the team begins to train her to learn the other elements. Kirima teaches her waterbending, Rangi teaches her firebending, and Wang teaches her to use her fans as an extension of her body. During this time, the relationship between Rangi and Kyoshi grows closer and closer until, just before the rescue, they end up making love after the firebender almost loses her life in combat, openly showing her Daofei brothers that she is a lesbian. During her training with Lao Ge, the old man plants seeds to explain how he was able to live so long, a method that consisted of meditating and taking a complete inventory of every part of his body on a daily basis. In addition, Tigui the Immortal tells her that on the night of the mission, she would have to pass a test. If she really wanted to become a cold-blooded assassin to face Shanzu, she had to prove it. And so, while the entire Daofei gang attacked the palace to rescue the prisoner, they would separate from the group to assassinate Governor Te, a highly corrupt politician who let his people starve to death in order to enrich himself. She was willing to kill Zhanzu for revenge, but would she kill someone for justice? The day of the attack on the palace of Te arrives. The largest mafia gang would attack from the front, giving the Flying Opera Company time to infiltrate from behind to rescue the prisoner. And while that was happening, Lao Ge and Kyoshi would go even further in until they found Te. And that is exactly what happens. The thing is, when Kyoshi enters the room where Governor Te is, she sees that he is just a 16-year-old boy who is basically wetting himself. He wasn't corrupt because he had evil ideas, he wasn't a tyrant, but rather, he was doing what his family had done for generations, so Kyoshi decides to spare his life. But first, she intimidates him enough that he will never forget her painted face and treat her people as he should. So, Te escapes, completely traumatized for life. Kyoshi doesn't kill anyone, and the prisoner is released. And this would be a real problem, because the person they rescued was Xu Ping-an, former leader of a criminal gang even bigger than the Autumn Flower, the Yellow Necks. During the Avatarless era, the Yellow Necks ravaged the Earth Kingdom, and it was Jianzhu who buried 5,000 of his men and halted their expansion, or so the myth goes. The thing is, Xu Ping-an was more shady than the gravedigger of Shulu Pass. He was known for being a madman, like, let's kill 2 or 3 people to start the day off with good vibes. He was a psychopath, and now that the Earth Kingdom was free, night was falling again. The opera company's debt was paid off, but now they had released a mass murderer who took less than 2 hours to start doing evil deeds. So, a few hours after her rescue, the esteemed Kyoshi challenges Zhu Ping'an to a lei tai, a kind of Agni-kai between Daofei, because it was the only way she could win without the whole gang getting involved. By the codes, guys. They agree that weapons and elements can be used since Kyoshi still didn't have much training, and it was one of the few chances she had to defeat him. What she didn't know was that Zhu was a firebender with the ability to use lightning. To give you an idea, at that time, the use of lightning was so rare that Zhu was imprisoned for 8 years solely to investigate how the hell he did it. Even exceptional firebenders of the time did not possess this ability. The duel begins, and the good Zhu doesn't mess around, firing 5 lightning bolts at Kyoshi. The first one knocks her down, and the others finish her off while she's rolling on the ground. But just as she's about to die, she hears Rangi's cries of despair and enters her avatar state. With her airbending, she creates an impressive tornado that prevents Zhu from using firebending and lifts him higher and higher. When they are in the air, she understands that sometimes there are things that must be done, dropping him from a great height and finally finishing him off. After this fight, Kyoshi remains unconscious for 3 days due to the damage she has suffered, and when she wakes up in a nearby village, her Daofei friends are with her. Her hands are covered in scars from the burns caused by the lightning. There, she has a little chat with Rangi and Lek, reconciling with the latter. Well, not reconciling, but basically they never got along. The reason is that Kyoshi's parents abandoned her, but Lek, who was part of the flying opera company, treated her almost like his own child. Lek tells her that they left her to spare her from the dangers of a Daofei life, and they took care of him because he could be replaced much more easily than their own flesh and blood. In reality, her parents abandoned her to save her. They reconcile, Kyoshi recovers, and everything is fine. They even go out to buy gloves in town, and when they are returning, out of nowhere, Kyoshi sees Lek fall to the ground. Then Rangi and her, all 3 were completely paralyzed on the floor. Someone shot them with darts containing shirshu poison. Rangi is taken away. Kyoshi is completely immobilized but conscious in front of Lek and sees that the boy is not only paralyzed but also swelling up. He has an allergic reaction to the poison, choking and slowly dying in front of her. When Kyoshi regains consciousness, she takes Lek's body with the rest of the flying opera company and finds a letter. It was from Zhanju, inviting her to meet in a nearby village, and if she didn't attend, Rangi would die. To prove it, he left the firebender's ponytail in the letter. Kyoshi knows that the time has come. She was going to kill Zhanju once and for all, despite her lack of preparation and her poor health. The rest of the team would travel by Pengpeng to Yokoya to rescue Rangi, while she would meet with the old man at a tea house in a nearby village. Finally, Kyoshi arrives in Quinshao, and at the end of the street is the tea house where he will meet Genju. When he enters, he sees the architect sitting at a table for 2. He took a seat and stared at him. Kyoshi was still suffering from the aftermath of his fight with Shu, and Genju looked more deteriorated than usual from the poison he had consumed when killing his political opponents. Genju, with all the calmness in the world, asked him to return without causing any more trouble so that he could continue his training. If he didn't, not only would Rangi die, but the entire establishment would collapse, killing everyone there. Kyoshi told him that would be appropriate, considering his reputation among the Daofei. The nickname of the Gravedigger of the Zhulu Pass suited him perfectly. Genju laughs and tells him the truth about that little legend. First, he tortured the few Daofei who were earthbenders. Then he told the rest that whoever dug the deepest trench would leave that place alive. All day long they dug non-stop. Some killed each other to get a shovel, and when they did, he simply covered them with dirt, burying them alive in graves they had dug themselves. mentioning that true strength lies in subjugating people, not the elements. Disgusted by what he was, Kyoshi takes out a small piece of stone that Lek used as a weapon and shoots it at Jianzhu's forehead using her fans, but the architect manages to stop it almost effortlessly. At first, he is a little surprised by how he can now bend small rocks, but then, with a sinister smile, he tells Kyoshi that she killed everyone present with that action. With a small gesture of his hand, he leaves the rock in the center of the table, overcoming Kyoshi's strength. And then, the ceiling and walls begin to shake. Kyoshi quickly tries to counteract it. The floor shakes and dust falls from the ceiling, but people still don't realize what's happening. Both are motionless in a constant tug of war, trying to stop the rock from the table while holding up an entire building. The first one to blink or falter would lose control. With his leg, the architect tries to pull a wall down on her, but she reacts and stops him. After a few seconds, fatigue begins to set in. The rock on the table seems to be welded in place. It doesn't move an inch, while little by little, the walls of the house begin to crack. But suddenly, they feel a force joining their struggle, making it even more difficult for them to control the situation. Kyoshi hears footsteps approaching. The stone shoots out in an instant, and he feels it hit something. Someone has picked it up, overcoming the strength of both of them, and is playing with it as if it were a simple rock from the street. The hooded figure is Yoon. He looks the same as the last time in the cave, only with a colder gaze and somewhat paler than he ever was. While Jianzhu and Kyoshi are still motionless, struggling with each other to hold up the weight of the building, Yoon moves the stone toward Jianzhu's chest, and with a single movement, he pierces him completely while looking Kyoshi in the eyes. Finally, he looks at her, winks gently, and as the noise of the building increases and the dust from the ceiling falls harder, he leaves. The tea house begins to collapse, and Kyoshi returns to reality, making every effort to hold it up while people escape. But when everyone gets out and she manages to escape, people blame her. They say she was the cause of everything that happened, walking among the ruins of the tea house, with the architect's body buried, and with Yoon, who still doesn't understand how, is alive. The team manages to rescue Rongi and Heiran. Rongi will travel to the Northern Water Tribe to cure his mother from the poison. The rest will go their separate ways, and Kyoshi will travel to the Southern Air Temple to rest and receive training. Meditating on everything that had happened on the temple balconies, the spirit of Karuk appeared to her, begging for her help. But that part of the story will be left for another video. Kyoshi's path was based on the quest for revenge. She did whatever was necessary to kill Jianzhu, and when she had the opportunity, it was taken away from her. Now the threat is much greater, and it doesn't even come from this world. So if you would like to know the second part of Kyoshi's story, leave me a comment and like this video. Believe me, it took me a long time to prepare all this, so I would really appreciate it if you could give it your love. In the meantime, here are 55 revelations from Roku's novel, which, by the way, will soon have a second part. See you next time, and thank you very much for staying with us. Bye!